Welcome to another episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Player Ranks. In this series, we rank various Yu-Gi-Oh! Themes based on your comments and suggestions. Come back every tier list Tuesday to see an all-new installment of this series. Alright guys, new tier list. We are doing one every single week, every single Tuesday for Tier List Tuesday. This is the next one. If you like these tier lists, subscribe, like down below, and of course comment what tier list you want to see. We're trying to do this on a weekly basis, so be a part of something bigger. Because we are doing them as much as possible. Right now we are doing the jars. We are doing, the jars. There's no further explanation. These are very iconic cards all throughout the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Some are bad, some are insanely good. So we're going to go through all of them today. Let's start with Aroma Jar. This is one of those that's a tough one to rate because it's bad now, but it could have been good at one point. We don't know. It's a tough one. Say it's probably around D tier. We should probably create a C tier, add a row below, and make it the C tier because honestly this card is the definition of C tier. So basically what this card does is when it is flipped face up, it cannot be destroyed by card effects. So if your opponent attacks it, it's flipped, it can't be destroyed by battle. I meant to say. And then on top of that,
is it just battle?
And then on top of that, it gains you life points every single end phase. So it's like it's weird. It's like a decent card in a stall deck. You shouldn't be playing it, but in reality, in theory, it's not a bad card. In a slower format, in a draft, something like that, it could be a decent card. The only deck that really benefits from this is like Aroma Jars, or Arrow Mages. But other than that, this card's not like the best card.
Arrow Mages, Aroma Jar.
There's something there. We got Morphing Jar is an S tier. It's one of the best jars ever.
It's limited to one, but it's still really crazy. It's like just drawing a whole new hand. And if you're low on resources, 0, just flip it with some random thing or something.
Yeah. This is a really good one. Yeah, discard all cards you and your opponent control. Draw 5 cards. It's insane. It just refills everything. On top of that, let's be honest. If this card was at 3, there'd be a lot of people playing Empty Jar, decking out your opponent. This card is actually really, really crazy. I don't even know if this card's ever been at 3. I think this is one of those cards that just like was released and went to 1 immediately because this card was like this card's insane. Like this card at 3 would be crazy. Especially with Cyber Jar. Cyber Jar is another S tier. These are probably going to be the best 2 jars ever made. Cyber Jar, flip, destroy all monsters on the field, and you basically draw 5 cards, you and your opponent, and then you put every single monster that's level 4 or lower, you can normal summon or set face down. If these two are both at 3, Empty Jar would probably be the best deck in the entire game. It really would. It would probably be the best deck in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it's basically 6 cards that can draw 5 cards each. I mean, it's 30 cards right there, and that's without trying to like loop them. That's 30 cards just with the copies of these cards exactly. It would be absolutely like disgusting. So that's why Cyber Jar's here.
And what's funny is that they get you more resources, so you don't have to ever worry about
running out of energy. They might draw you into more Cyber Jars and Morphing Jars and stuff like that. Yeah, these two are just really, really crazy. Next is Dice Jar. This is another like weird one. It's probably like a C tier. Dice Jar is basically you and your opponent roll a dice, and then whoever gets the higher roll inflicts life points to the other person. So like let's say one of you rolls a 1, the other one rolls a 2. It's 2 times 500. So you let's say I rolled a 2 and my opponent rolled a 1. I would inflict 1,000 to my opponent because it's 2 times the number that you roll times 500. But if either of you rolls a 6, it becomes 6,000 damage, which that part again is crazy, but you're leaving a lot of this to chance. And the problem with leaving it to chance is that there's no guarantee that you're going to burn your opponent. You might actually end up burning yourself and losing the entire duel. So that's why this one's a little bit weird. Next is Absorbing Jar. Absorbing Jar is probably like a D tier. It's very, very bad spell and trap card removal. And the reason I say that is because it destroys all spell and trap cards on the field after it's flipped, and then both players draw a card for every single card that is destroyed that they controlled. So as far as backer removal goes, this is terrible because you destroy 5, let's say you destroy 5 spell and trap cards your opponent controls, they just draw 5 new cards. So it's not even like It's not even good like a Cyber Jar, because at least with Cyber Jar, you destroy your opponent's monsters, they don't come back. But with this thing, they get resources for every card you destroy. It's kind of terrible.
And if they have like two trap set, but then they just have like a continuous spell that just sat there, like a field spell they only used once and they got the effect off them, then you're getting like extra resources on top of those. Like if they activated like Tenki or something, then it's like there's just so much that they gain positively from that. Oh yeah, and then on top of that, you can't set any cards that turn, so you can so you can't even like set something and destroy it and then get your own like additional effects. So it's just I don't know what it is about it. It's just so bad.
It's just horrific. It just I don't know why anything D tier and below is just a mess in this tier list. Next we've got, what's this thing? This is Flip Jar, I think. Yeah, Flip Jar. Flip Jar is another one that's weird. It's almost like a card that's created for like...
Oh, Reverse Jar.
That's what it's called, Reverse Jar?
Yeah.
No, it's Flip Jar.
Flip Jar.
Oh, Reverse Jar, alright. This is a card that's almost like created to enable Empty Jar, to help Empty Jar, because when it's flipped, it flips all monsters on the field face down. And then it returns spell and trap cards to the hand, up to the number of monsters that were flipped face down. Which is, again, kind of weird. It's like it almost helps one strategy, but it like...
No. It flips the monsters, and then it bounces all the spells.
Oh,
and
bounces.
Traps. And then you set from your hand the same number.
The same number. Oh, so that's
both
pointless.
players, yeah.
So I guess it like helps Empty Jar go second. But again, it's like... If you want Empty Jar to be better, you would just release the Morphing Jar and Cyber Jar. You don't need to create new support for a strategy. You would just take things off the ban list. It's one of those weird things. I don't know why, but Konami likes to do this. They'll give new support to archetypes that should just get things off the ban list. Like Gem Knights just got support. If they just took Brilliant Fusion off the ban list, they don't need to release anything else. So it's a little bit odd that they do this. So it's kind of like an okay card for that.
And this is the newest jar we've gotten, right?
That is the newest jar. It came out, I think, one set ago. It's extremely new. Next is Dimension Jar. This is another one that's just like not that good. When it's flipped face up, you and your opponent can banish up to 3 cards from your opponent's graveyard, from each other's graveyards. Which again is like, why does he even give you the option, your opponent the option to banish things out of your graveyard? I have no idea. Again, it's a flip effect. Here's the problem with a lot of these cards. Flip effects are just extremely slow. They are not built for modern Yu-Gi-Oh! So a lot of these cards unfortunately suck. These wouldn't suck just because their effects are so broken, where even though they're flip effects, you can play things like Book of Taiyu, Book of Moon to loop them and draw out your opponent's cards. But these cards have to have, for a flip effect to be worth it, you have to have absolutely broken effects. You can't be like, oh, I don't know, this is just okay. There's no just okay. Like this card exists on a spell card that you can activate at any time, and you don't have to, like, DD Crow is 100 times better than Dimension Jar. Because it's a quick effect, you can activate it during your opponent's turn. It's a hand trap. You can activate it literally anytime you want. This card, on the other hand, you have to set face down and leave it, wait for your opponent to attack into it, and then you flip it, and I banish cards out of your grave. It's too slow, it's too late. That's why this card is in D tier. It's just not good enough. Next is Fiber Jar. Might be a little controversial. Fiber Jar is only an A tier. It's actually less broken than the two up here. It actually, I don't even think, has a function in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! To be 100% honest with you, basically what it does is when it's flipped face up, it shuffles back cards from your graveyard, from both players' graveyards, hand, and field, and then you draw 5 cards. So basically like soft resets the duel. Honestly, in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't even think that would be all that great, because no opponent would be dumb enough to run into this. And again, you have to set a monster, wait for your opponent to attack it, and then you basically have to do this. It doesn't even deck out your opponent because it resets the duel anyway. So it doesn't even like work with Empty Jar. It's just it's not a card that would be particularly good in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! It was something that was annoying back in 2003, and it wasn't even really that good in 2003. It was just annoying in 2003. So I don't even think it was really all that great back then, but it's definitely not all that great now. That's why it's an A tier, possibly a B tier, probably somewhere around here.
The only things it doesn't reset is the banish and the life points. So it's like, unless they like banish like main combo pieces that they only have like one of or something like that, then it's like, oh, then they can't do their combo again, maybe. But like outside of that, it's just like It's still just really bad. Even if you like set it on your turn and like you went second and you like book up Tayud or something, it's like no matter how you look at it, it's just bad.
Yeah, I mean it's an A tier again. It's one of those things. It's like a legacy card, and we understand how it was good at one point, but unfortunately in a modern game, this card can honestly come off the ban list. It could be a 3. It won't matter. No one will use it. No one will play it. It's like Yatagarasu. Yatagarasu went to 1. Nobody plays. I've been saying for years you could bring that card back. It wouldn't have an impact. This is another card. It got banned in 2003. You can bring it back. It doesn't matter. It's just not that impactful. It's just not that strong. It's not good in modern Yu-Gi-Oh. No one's gonna run into this, and even if they do, who cares? It is cool because it's non-targeting like removal, but it's just not that great. Next is Morphing Jar number 2. It's probably like a B or a C tier. Morphing Jar number 2 is nowhere near as good as Morphing Jar number 1. Basically what it does is all monsters on the field get shuffled back into the deck, and then you and your opponent draw cards until you get monsters equal to the amount that you shuffled back. Meaning, let's say you shuffled back 2, you keep basically excavating until you get two monsters, and then with those two monsters, if they are level 4 or lower, you can special summon them or set them in defense mode to your side of the field. So if you get like 2 level 6s, for example, you just send them to the graveyard and you don't set them at all. If you get 2 level 4s, then you set the 2 level 4s. Both you and your opponent, you get basically the same amount back that you put in. So it's really not as good as some of the other jars. It doesn't actually help the entire empty jar strategy, and it's really one of the weaker jars. It's never even been touched on the ban list once. It's just really not all that good. It's never been that great of a jar.
What's also weird about it is that it's actually more like Cyber Jar than Morphing Jar. So I don't even know why they call it Morphing Jar number 2.
Yeah, it really is more like Cyber Jar because it does like get rid of field. It is cool. It's non-targeting removal too. It's like it shuffles back, which can be annoying. Next is Ancient Jar. This is actually the first jar. This is actually also a OCG exclusive. I don't think this card even exists in the TCG. I think it's one of those things, but the artwork is definitely related to the other jars. It's got the same like face as all of the other jars have, except it's on
a normal monster.
A normal monster. There's no effect. It is a level 1 rock, 400 attack, 200 defense. It is an utterly worthless card. It does nothing. I guess you can play it in like Adamanticators, and you can play like you got to justify things. You can play like 1 for 1 unexpected die, but in all reality, that's a synchro deck. You want larger level monsters. You want level 4 monsters to go into Galleon Granite. So there's really no point to even play the Ancient Jar, even in that deck. So it's really not that useful whatsoever. That's why it is an F tier.
He does have a nice artwork though.
Cool artwork, but he literally is. He is Morphing Jar if he was like from a different angle and if he was yellow. Like it's weird. This is like the front of Morphing Jar, and this is like the top of Morphing Jar, but blue Morphing Jar. It's like the same artwork. Old Yu-Gi-Oh! Konami really liked to do that. They weren't like, they didn't want to make multiple different cards, so they would make like a similar looking card and they name it like Thunder Dragon number 2, Morphing Jar number 2. Like they would just do weird stuff like that, where they have like similar Wing Guardian of the Fortress number 1, number 2, where they have cards that look similar, but they'll like change the color and they'll create an entire new artwork for it. It's just a weird thing, and this is just one of those cards that is from that older era. Next is Cobra Jar. Probably like a D tier, really slow. So this card is actually a token generator, but it's a flip effect token generator. Virtually all token generators were banned between the years of 2017 and 2021. Almost all of the good token generators are gone. There's a very good reason this card is not one of those token generators. It is a flip effect token generator. It summons a token when it's flipped, and then it inflicts 500 when that token is destroyed by battle. It's not that good. Too slow. Flip effect token generator, not good enough. It's not exactly Dandelion. That's why this card is D tier. Next is, what is this? Jar Turtle. Yeah, this card's funny. Alright, so Jar Turtle, basically, when Jar of Greed is activated, you can draw a card. Either player activates Jar of Greed. So if your opponent activates Jar of Greed, you draw a card. If you activate Jar of Greed, you draw 2 cards because of the Jar of Greed plus this. That's cool and all, but this card's, number one, this card's stats suck. In terms, its attack sucks. Its defense isn't that bad, but its attack sucks. And this got released so late in the game. Which set did we say? It was Extreme Victory, right?
What, Jar Turtle?
Yeah, what does it say? Zoom that in. What does it say? EXVC, right? EXVC Extreme Victory. Just to give you some context, this came out in the same set as Tour Guide and TG Hyper Librarian. That's how good the other cards in that set were, and then they released Jar Turtle, which is no
It is
one.
a really funny looking face though.
It's an extremely funny looking card. I don't know.
It's great.
He looks like he's absolutely suffering. The Jar's thrilled. I don't. There's a lot that could really be thought about this that we're probably not going to say on YouTube. But there's that turtle's not happy. But that is, it's quite the artwork. But it's just no one plays Jar of Greed, so you'll never actually go plus. This card would have been maybe decent in GOAT format, maybe, because more people do play Jar of Greed in like GOAT format than they do in
Current.
Yeah, well, definitely current. But even when this came out, which is Extreme Victories, probably like 2011, I want to say Extreme Victories. So even then, it was already too late. This card's just not that good, and of course it relies on Jar of Greed. Next card is an easy F tier, Jar Robber. This card basically what it does is when your opponent activates Pot of Greed, or
when your opponent activates Pot of Greed, you can negate it and then draw a card.
I'm sorry, it's when a Pot of Greed is activated. So you can activate the Pot of Greed, negate your own Pot of Greed, and then draw a card also.
Let's be real.
Let's be real. Nobody's playing this to begin with, because Pot of Greed is banned. Pot of Greed is banned, so I mean this is an unplayable card completely. Yeah, it's just dead. There's nothing you can do. I wish I could rate it higher. I'm not going to, even if Pot of Greed was legal, but
at that point you just play like
just play Ash.
Any negate.
Just play Ash and you're good. You don't have to play specific cards. Like this are the worst cards in Yu-Gi-Oh, which are cards that respond specifically to other cards. So you have stuff like Anti-Raigeki, you have stuff like White Hole, you have stuff like this, you have stuff like this card that stops Harpie's Feather Duster that was a hollow in the Pegasus deck. Those cards are just horrific. Like when there are cards that are built to stop specific cards, they do nothing when your opponent doesn't play those cards or doesn't draw those cards. Even if they're game-breaking tier 0 cards like Pot of Greed was. If your opponent simply doesn't draw it, it's just worthless. And that's kind of the biggest issue with this card.
What's funny is that it's legal in 05, but still no one plays it. Everyone is definitely guaranteed to play Pot of Greed in 05, but they're still not playing this.
Of course, and that's the other problem. It's like, okay, let's say your opponent does play it. If they don't draw it, it's only limited to 1. Yeah. It's been limited to 1 since 2003.
Or they see it before you see this.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they already activated Pot of Greed, and then you have the Jar Robber, and then what happens? It's just dead. Next is Jar of Avarice. I'd say this is probably like a B tier. It's actually a decent like recursion card. It actually is quite decent. So basically what it does is you can target, was it 5 cards in your graveyard?
Yeah, 5 cards except for like another copy of itself.
Except Jar of Greed, and then you can shuffle them back in your deck and draw 1 card. So that card is actually not bad because you can target anything. There's not a lot of ways to get spells back into your graveyard. So spells and traps and monsters back into your deck, I meant to say. So this card can actually be good in certain strategies. I've seen it played. The only thing is it takes a lot of setup to get 5 cards in your graveyard and then put it, kind of like into play. There are decks that this is good in. Phantasm Spirals, you can put the trap cards back in your deck for you to use it. More of them throughout the duel. You can use this in Unchained to put all of your Unchained monsters, although Unchained, you can give your opinions on that some other time. But yeah, Unchained, you can put like all the Unchained monsters back so that you can re-loop all of those Unchained monsters all over again. But yeah, this card's actually kind of good in certain decks.
Yeah, it's like really like slow decks. Like you can really get the use out of it. So like you can re-loop your one-ofs and whatnot. But then in really fast decks, you can get your engine going again. It's really cool. Like you might not play this in a lot of decks, but if a deck has an archetype version of it, or they can summon like something like Daigusto Emerald or something, then they're definitely gonna use it.
Yeah. Next is the Jar of Greed. This is probably a B tier too. This would be an S tier card if more people ran the Jar Turtle. Yeah.
Yes.
If the turtle becomes meta, this is S tier. But this card is insane. Insanely okay, because all it does is just let you draw 1 card. Again, it's like a decent card. It's good in like Exodia decks. You just kind of, it's good in like those like Mystic Mine Exodia, Wabaku Exodia decks where you just chain a bunch of trap cards. Your opponent chains like back row removal. You just chain these things, draw a bunch of cards. In those decks, this card is actually decent. But again, Exodia hasn't been meta in years, and it's just overall just a really, really, really lackluster card. Lackluster overall, and Jar of Greed just falls into that. Also, it's just not all that great. It just draws one card. It's decent in like GOAT format because you can like set it and your opponent uses like MST and you just chain it and draw a card. If they try to like blind MST, or if they like use a heavy storm, you can just chain that, draw cards. Like, it's good against those situations, but for the most part, it's just slipped out of the meta. It just doesn't do enough. Drawing one card just not good enough.
Especially on your opponent's turn.
Yeah, during your opponent's turn, drawing a card. Like, what are you hoping to draw into? A hand trap? It's too slow. You want to draw during your turn, set up a board. This is one of those things. It just time has kind of destroyed that card. Next, we've got Dragon Capture Jar. This card is terrible. Basically, you flip it, and all dragon monsters on the field go to defense mode.
And they can't change back.
And they can't change back to attack position while this remains face up on the field. Again, it's one of those things. It's just, come on, man. It's like, it's just not good enough. Like, let's say best case scenario, you sit down, you're playing against Dragon Link, and you activate this card. What did you actually set up? You just put other dragons in defense mode. That's all it did. You're not. They're still gonna make their crazy board.
And if they have like Boar Lord, Boar Sword,
yeah,
Boar End, and it's like.
Oh yeah, and the Link monsters aren't even in the best case scenario. If you play a deck full of dragons, this card's still not very good because it doesn't even negate their effects. It just changes them to defense mode, so they could just pop this and then just keep going. They don't care. Yeah, this card's just not very. It doesn't even slow down the deck that it's intended to slow down. It's a very old, very terrible card. It was much better in the show. In the show, I think Pegasus used it. All of the dragons went to the jar and never came back. Not in this. It's not as good in this one. Next, we've got Redeemable Jar. This is a personal favorite of mine. If I'm being realistic, it's probably like a B tier card. This is a card that is actually kind of decent. It's a continuous trap. You can banish a trap card out of your graveyard, and then you can add any trap card in the graveyard back to your hand. I think this card is actually kind of good. It's good in like counter fairies and just trap decks that just put a bunch of trap cards very, very early into the graveyard. It would be decent in like a... It's very bad in Eldritch because obviously Eldritch trap cards you need to banish to get their effects. But this card is actually kind of decent in other trap decks like a Lair of Darkness deck. You can like banish one of your trap cards that you're never going to use ever again to add your other trap card back to your hand and keep reusing it. So I think this card is actually quite nice for recurring those. It's just unfortunately the problem with this card is it requires a bit of setup. You have to put 2 trap cards in the graveyard and then have this, and then it returns it to the hand. You can't use that trap card until next turn when you set it and then reuse it. So there has to be a bit of momentum when you use this card. So it's not really that insane. Next we've got Jar of Generosity. This is another easy F tier. This card's terrible. Like I just sometimes they print Yu-Gi-Oh cards. When was this released? What set? Can you zoom in? Or can I zoom in? And there's no set. This is one of those cards that's just like, I don't know when it's released, but I can almost guarantee you it wasn't before 2008. But it's one of those cards that just it's like you have to ask them, what is it? Dawn of Majesty. Dawn of Majesty.
It's like yesterday.
Dawn of Majesty was like 4 sets ago.
Jeez.
This card came out in Dawn of Majesty. That's a 2021 set. When you hear this effect, you're gonna fall out of your chair. This card lets you take a card from your hand and put it either to the top of your deck or to the bottom of your deck. This is one of those cards. If this came out, I don't even know why I put this up here. I think I'd rather play Jar Robber in my deck than this card. This card is because it's in the time it makes it even worse because this was just released. This card lets you put a card from your hand. You go -1. You go -2 because you activate this piece of crap. Yeah. You lose the card and you activate this. You go -2 during your opponent's turn, not during your turn. So in theory, right, like let's say you drew a card that, let's say you draw like Mecha Phantom Beast Colt Wing, and you need Mecha Phantom Beast Colt Wing in your deck, not in your hand to actually resolve its effects. But instead, you have it in your hand. So I'm going to put it back with Jar of Generosity. You have to pass, and then during your opponent's turn, put it back. It's such a terrible card. It just goes -2, and I'm in shock that this card was released this recently.
Shout out to the guy on TCG Player trying to sell 7 Jar of Generosities for $5.
This card is horrible. Horrible. Horrible.
Yeah, there's nothing it can help with. Like,
It's just horrible. And the fact that it was just released, like, if this card came out in 2003 in Legend of Blue Eyes, it would still be unplayable.
actually, to make it even worse, isn't there a spell card that does the same thing?
I believe so. I think there's Pot of Generosity. There's a Pot of Generosity does the same thing, yeah. It lets you put up to 2. This card in every way is just horrific. Like, there's nothing... What is it? Return 2 cards. Yeah.
That's better. I think Pot of Generosity is better. Even though you lose an extra card, at least you put back like Red Eyes Fusion or something like that for your
during your
Anaconda.
turn.
Well, when Anaconda.
This thing is during your... Yeah, there's nothing redeemable about it. I can't even think of anything that would be good about this card. It's just horrific. Sometimes I really don't know how they work out their card design. This card could have came out before Yu-Gi-Oh came out, and I think people would have been like, that doesn't sound very good. That's how bad this is. You couldn't even come up with this is one of those cards that Yugi activates in the show when Kaiba activates Delinquent Duo. Like, this is the kind of thing that, like, you got to be lucky. This is one of those, like, random cards that Yugi Moto uses one time in one duel, and then you never see again. That's how horrifically specific this card is. But on that note, we're done with the jar tier list. If you would like to see any other tier lists, recommend them down below, because obviously we need to know which ones to make. We've got a few coming down the pipeline here. But again, let us know in the comment section which tier list you want to see. If you have any creative ideas, definitely put them down there. And thank you for watching.
La 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 la